now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Today I've got a very special guest on the channel. I decided to mix it up and bring a non-Arsenal fan on and a football expert in Dougie Critchley. Dougie works for Sky Sports and many of you will have seen him on the box over the years. Welcome to the channel. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Adam. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, we were just talking before we started recording. International break, obviously. Sunderland going in with brilliant momentum after that draw against you guys. You guys may be a little bit disappointed with how that game ended. But yeah, I'm loving this season so far. It feels very competitive in every area of the table. It really helps having your own club back up for the first time since 2017 after years of struggle, 4 of those years in League One. So I'm absolutely loving the ride. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm absolutely gutted with the late equaliser at Sunderland. I was saying before we started recording that I was at the game. It was an absolutely manic atmosphere in the away end. It was one of the best away days I've had for a long time. And it felt like we were just going to get over the line. And it was one of those where Sunderland actually came out and tried to push for that. But ironically, they didn't actually have a shot between us scoring and that one. And it felt like we ran out of steam slightly. There were a few errors in the build up to the goal, but at the end of the day, it's a point and it's one of those that you keep going. But I wanted to get your views on Arsenal this season. It's the first time I've had a non-Arsenal fan on this channel, and I wanted to go to someone who had a wide breadth of knowledge across the league. So what are your thoughts on us this season and how we've started and how we've maintained our form?
Yeah, well, first of all, I thought in my pre-season predictions video, I actually thought Liverpool were going to win the league, which has aged spectacularly badly. And I think on current evidence, they feel very much out of this title race. I did think it would be between Liverpool and Arsenal. I didn't necessarily believe in Man City this season, just with some huge players departing in the summer, De Bruyne, Gundogan, etc. I thought that was going to take a while, even maybe not just necessarily on the pitch, but in terms of how that dressing room operated and the kind of spirit around the club. It felt like a kind of transitional year for them. Whereas you guys didn't lose any key players, probably signed fewer starters than a lot of other of those two at least. And the squad depth that you guys have now built is just phenomenal. And it now looks like every lesson that you've learned from the last few years, where you've fallen short generally due to bad luck with injuries, but maybe not being deep enough in every position of the squad. You've really addressed that really brilliantly so far. And the results, I think, have been really impressive, particularly since that win against Newcastle, the draw against City. It felt like those were crucial at that point of the season. And yes, you'll be disappointed to drop 2 points at Sunderland, but I'm kind of with you. I think 5:30 on a Saturday night, on Wearside against the Sunderland side, carrying huge momentum from the start of the season that no one really saw coming from a Sunderland persuasion, at least. I don't think that would be a terrible point in the end. And you look at, I'm sure we'll touch on it, some of your underlying numbers, your defensive solidity. This feels like a side and a squad that's built to go deep in all 4 competitions this year.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the 5:30 on Wearside. It was loud, it was boisterous. It was an afternoon where people were hitting the pints all day, and they come in with a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm, partly because of the kickoff time, but also because of the momentum Sunderland have had. I am inclined to think that whilst it was kind of gut-wrenching when we conceded, that this might actually look like a good point in time. It was one of those, it hurt a bit more because of the nature of the weekend. Liverpool played City, and it was a chance for us to go further forward. But on a performance level, what did you think of that game? Because obviously you're a Sunderland fan, and it gave you a chance to watch us up close against the team you support.
Yeah, I thought first half pretty flat, to be totally honest. But by the end of the game, I was kind of thinking that this game had gone away from us. I was quite impressed with the spirit we showed in that. And we did show more attacking intent than we have in a lot of games, actually, weirdly, this season. And Sunderland have been competitive in every fixture they've played so far, aside from maybe the defeat at Old Trafford, where we didn't really turn up and they scored very early and kind of eased away from us. But we've beaten Chelsea away. We've beaten a number of other sides like Nottingham Forest, etc., who were in Europe, obviously. We've got draws against Aston Villa and Crystal Palace. and Everton in a game we kind of dominated on that Monday Night Football prior to that game against Arsenal. In terms of where you guys are at, I actually thought by the end of, from minute 45 to 75 in particular, I thought you guys played some outstanding football, to be totally honest. And the quality of goals you ended up scoring, Trossard again, it feels like him and Martinelli have been kind of motivated by the competition that's been brought in this season. And the knowledge that, yes, they might not start every game, but if they're coming off the bench for 20, 25 minutes, you've really got to turn up and perform. And they know this system better than the new players that have arrived. And in the end, I think, given the fact that you were missing players like Gyökeres, Odegaard, Martinelli, Madueke, etc., who will all be back in the next few weeks, I actually think Arsenal's run of form at the moment is pretty impressive. The slightly concerning thing is that after losing 2 of their first 3 league games of the season, City have only taken 1 fewer point than Arsenal across the last 8. And whilst I don't think their performances have been as complete as you guys during a lot of that time, they did have a phenomenal week before the international break, beating Bournemouth with ease at the Etihad. They then beat Dortmund, and obviously that very comfortable victory over Liverpool on Sunday, which typically the 4:30 game just before the international break, it's kind of what leaves the lasting memory and impression going into that international break. And I do think you are the more complete side, and I do expect you guys to win the league, but I think they are a threat in this title race. And it does feel like you guys are the only sides that are capable of winning this league.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you at the start of the season, I didn't see City as a title contender. But when you have a player who is scoring goals at will, like Erling Haaland, you're always going to be in it with a shot of games. And I also think Haaland has added so much more to his game this season. He's not just a final action player. He's involved in much more of the build-up. His runs are coming from much deeper. He's starting sometimes 20 yards behind the back line and powering his way through. His movement is so elusive as always. But just on to the Sunderland game as well, a couple of things that I wanted to highlight were the goals you mentioned. The first one in particular of ours, the Saka goal, because I thought it was a very good reflection of who Mikel Arteta's Arsenal are. We had some moments before the goal, didn't quite take them, but this one was a huge moment for us. And it's one of those where pass comes out and you can see Declan Rice right at the start of this. He's really closing in, comes in, gets that ball straight away. There's a player facing the wrong way, in trouble with absolutely nothing on. The only option here is play it back to the keeper. But what's interesting is how aggressively Rice hounds this ball out. And this is something that we're seeing more and more often. And with Zubimendi, but beside him, Rice has got more freedom to do what he does. And as you can see with the movement itself, doesn't take long before he turns into danger and Declan Rice isn't letting that go. And then you see Arsenal straight away, the number of players that start sweeping forward the minute this comes. And this was something we didn't have last season. We didn't have players really joining the attack with pace. We didn't have runners in the team. And even now without Gyökeres, Marino's a very slow player, but he's straight in there. And it's a great finish from Saka. It's possibly one of the more underrated finishes that you'll see. But you can see here from this angle, the pressure that we've put Sunderland under in this. You can see 4 Sunderland players back, and there's 5 Arsenal players in the view here. That kind of aggression in attack, again, is something that we were criticised heavily for, and probably rightly so last season. But when the ball comes in, there are options. You can see Eze coming round, but Saka doesn't need the option. Trossard's coming into the picture. It's just so aggressive and so fast. And that finish itself is something that I think it's another thing that Saka's adding to his locker. But that aggression in attack and that counter-pressing ability, do you think that's something that set Arsenal apart this season? Or do you think there's something more that's really helping us get over the line?
I think it's definitely been a factor. I think it does feel like the shackles have been released slightly, and you do feel a little bit less sort of stuck to your set positions. That Arteta, he's a disciple of Pep Guardiola. There is going to be elements of, obviously the influences he's had throughout his career. And you can see a lot of David Moyes, and I don't even mean that disrespectfully, in Mikel Arteta's side and the way he sets up. But there is a sort of elements of Pep Guardiola there for sure. I do think you've been freer in a lot of attacking zones this year. And I think Eberechi Eze is a good example of that. This is a player that doesn't really stick to one position, and that's kind of his strength. He goes and sniffs out weaknesses in the opposition, uses technical assuredness on the ball and his eye for a pass to kind of pull players in different positions. I totally agree with you. I think Saka's finishing with both feet now is just absolutely elite. And you see his goal he scored for England last night as well. Phenomenal finish. And then Eze wraps it up. Although, as we spoke about off camera as well, I don't know why they're giving so much credit to Phil Foden for that pass when it was an unbelievable finish from Havertz Eze, who feels like one of those players that has just taken to international football so easily. But in terms of where Arsenal's attack is at, it's actually interesting to see that your shots this season have only gone up from 14.4 per game to 14.7. But whereas 14.4 last season ranked 5th in the Premier League, 14.7 this year ranks 2nd, and only Liverpool have taken more this season, but they're only on 14.8, and we know that their attack just really hasn't clicked. So Arsenal's attack has got slightly better in terms of shot numbers for sure, and there'll also be an element of, I think, you're taking shots closer to goal and creating higher XG per shot as well, which speaks to an improvement in the kind of quality of chances you guys are creating. But I think it also has to be acknowledged that a lot of attacking sides in the Premier League this year are kind of struggling. And there's been a new emphasis on set pieces and physicality and transition, which are all things that Arsenal have been built to kind of thrive in. You've got 2 outstanding dead ball specialists in Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka. You've got an absolute set of units off the bench as well. And in your starting 11, you've got one of the best sort of aerial defenders that the Premier League's probably seen since John Terry and Gabriel. And you've got these players that are just dual specialists at fullback as well. Jurrien Timber has gone up to a new level, I think, this season. And I think he was really solid last year, but you could still see he was kind of coming back from that ACL injury. And actually maybe more like 6 to 12 months ago, I was quite a big fan of the White Odegaard Saka relationship, which had been so crucial to you in your first few title challenges. But the way that Jurrien Timber is now just taking hold of that shirt and just will not let go of it is super impressive. And then Calafiori, who came back from an injury hit year last year, came back, and Miles Lewis-Skelly was playing out of his skin, and Lewis-Skelly deserved his spot on the side at that particular moment. But the way that Calafiori has become this attacking threat as well, I think it's only Gyökeres who's taken more shots than Calafiori so far this season. And that's not something that we really associated with him during his time at Bologna or in his early few months at Arsenal as well. So it does feel like there's been a real evolution in the way you guys attack. And we mentioned him there, but Martin Zubimendi, I'm slightly biased, and I probably think the signing of the season's been Granit Xhaka, but Martin Zubimendi's right in the mix in that conversation as well. His fearlessness on the ball and his ability to pick out passes, keep the game simple, but also contribute in the final third. We've seen some amazing scooped passes. I think it was against Newcastle for Eze. We've seen some outstanding finishes against Nottingham Forest as well. He's really, really got it all. And what it's allowing Declan Rice to do, as you correctly point out with that tackle on Enzo Lefebvre, is this freer role to go hound players, to go pick up dangerous positions, to drive forward. And Declan Rice is really thriving from having a player like Martin Zubimendi alongside him as well.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned the physicality we have, the dead balls, the set piece, both the delivery and the players to attack them. It feels like Arsenal were prepped for the change in environment within the Premier League. However, we've added the players that we maybe lacked. So some of the things that teams had last year, we've now added them, and the core stability that we already had feels like it lends itself to what's bringing success right now. But one thing I wanted to touch on was the tactical evolution of this side, because there's been a lot of change. People will always say that Arteta's changed nothing because he plays control-based football. It's very high possession. However, it's very clear that there's been a lot of tactical tweaks, and that's made a big difference. You mentioned shots as well. So I've got this graphic from The Athletic, and it's touches in the box and average shots in the box. And you mentioned we're taking more shots closer to goal. And this very much demonstrates this. You look at Arsenal and City, we're both way ahead in terms of the average touches in the box and the average shots in the box. And that's a big factor that we didn't have last season. I think we were getting so far up the pitch and we were hitting less high quality shots, and that was a problem with goal scoring. We also had less runners, less stretchers, and less people willing to go in behind, and that's a profile issue. You can't tactic your way to running power, dribbling quality, all those things that lead to goals a lot of the time. But this year we've also added through ball play, and if you look at the most through balls, Arsenal are actually quite some way ahead, and this is something we're often accused of not doing enough. And I would add that we haven't had Martin Odegaard for the majority of the season, who has historically been one of the top through ball players in Europe. So with this in mind, where do you think Arsenal are going tactically? Because we've now got an influx of players returning, but these numbers have happened without some of those key players who you would often associate with those stats.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the most exciting thing from an Arsenal perspective at the moment. You know, we've seen in previous years your kind of form really drop off when there's been a few key absentees or suspensions, etc. This year, you feel so much more capable, kind of whatever the situation, to dominate most games. And the fact, you know, what was it? One shot on target conceded in the entirety of October, something ridiculous. 8 clean sheets in a row since, 1903. It's remarkable levels of control. And I actually was kind of joking going into the game last week, saying, I'm just hoping we get some shots on target. And of course, we end up scoring 2 goals. And earlier that day, I'd kind of been talking about Arsenal potentially breaking Chelsea's record of 15 goals conceded, which now hasn't aged that well, but I was kind of undone by my own side. But I think it'll be tight. I can't see you conceding that many more than 20, if I'm totally honest. But in terms of what it could do, having some of these players back, I don't think Victor Gyokeres was necessarily guaranteed to start every game if Kai Havertz was fit. You know, Mikel Arteta has generally been a big defender of Kai Havertz since he's arrived. And yes, he played his first sort of, 4 or 5 months in midfield, but really since Gabriel Jesus' injury. And Kai Havertz responded really well to the kind of trust that Arteta placed in him. And you saw actually in that Burnley game, which Gyokeres sadly had to go off in, just how comfortable this guy was now in this side, which is really, really exciting. And kind of the all-round game that he was kind of criticised for at points by members of the media and other pundits, etc., maybe lacking compared to someone like a Hugo Ekitike, who Arsenal were also linked with in the summer. I actually thought some of his play in transition and his hold-up play was absolutely brilliant against Burnley. And it's interesting to see that came after, I think he was rested in the previous Champions League game. He's thrived this season when he's been playing 1 game a week, really. I think his best performances have generally been, and there's just been such a big workload on him because of those injuries you've got. So now if he can be rotated with Kai Havertz coming on for the final 30 minutes or starting games, I think you could see an even more dangerous Victor Gyokeres. Bukayo Saka, I can't remember the last time he had 3 bad games in a row. I can barely remember the time he had 2 bad games in a row. It's his consistency is absolutely remarkable. And then you've got someone like Noni Madueke, who a lot of people criticised the signing at the time, myself included. I didn't necessarily think he was the kind of left winger that Arsenal needed, but obviously outstanding depth on the right-hand side as well. But on the basis of his first few performances at Arsenal, looked incredibly comfortable and energised by the challenge of being at Arsenal as well. Martinelli as well, I thought some crucial goals earlier this season, particularly the one against Athletic Club. I thought in the Champions League game against Athletic Club, where they were playing pretty well. There wasn't a lot in that game, but you then scored twice in the final 10 minutes, and it kind of gave you a lot of momentum going into those big Premier League games against the likes of Newcastle and City as well. So the squad depth is frightening, really. And it's the kind of key reason why I do have you down as favourites as it stands. And I know I said Liverpool at the top of the show is who I predicted before a ball was kicked, but you've got to update your takes on the basis of evidence we've seen. And 5 goals conceded so far, absolutely remarkable. The joint best record in Europe's top 5 leagues. You've got the best record by expected goals against. The attack could probably be better, and I think it will be better when these players come back. And Odegaard's back to full fitness as well. I think you're 19th in Europe for goals scored. I think you're below the likes of Hoffenheim, etc. But when you've got a defence like that, you're going to be in. I can't see that many scenarios, and I know we've just seen it, where Arsenal concede 2 goals in a league game. And look, Sunderland rode their luck at points as well on the weekend. Like, we were super clinical with the chances we got given. So it's looking pretty good for Arsenal.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think you're right. There were periods where Sunderland rode their luck, but I also think Sunderland had a very good performance. There were moments Zubimendi hit the bar. Calafiori should have won it at the end. And that would have been absolute pandemonium in the away end had that have gone in. But it doesn't happen, and I think Sunderland deserve a lot of credit for the performance. But just on Victor Gyokeres, one of the big changes this season is how he occupies centre-backs. That's something Kai Havertz likes to drift around the pitch. He's more of a false 9 who's very good in the air. But we've seen this example against Burnley. You can see two centre-backs very, very close to Havertz, or to Gyökeres, paying close attention. And again, in the Fulham game, where you've got space for Saka beyond out the right, and if that ball's played quickly, there's two centre-backs trying to work out where they're going to go with Gyökeres. On this occasion, someone's got his arms right around him, and you can see the left back might be Robinson, but he's very, very tight to Gyökeres, and Saka's actually getting the space. But that signing has been something that it has changed how we've played. The runs he makes off the ball, I think at times have been basic, and a lot of people have criticised Arsenal for maybe not playing him through. But you mentioned improvements in his game, the Burnley game in particular, his hold-up play, some of his runs. I think his passing as well is something that deserves a lot of credit. He played Saka through for a very, very good chance. These are things that we weren't seeing from Gyökeres a couple of months ago. So how do you think that's changed Arsenal as a whole? And ultimately, do you think he's someone that will be able to play with Havertz, or do you think this is something that's going to be a one-in, one-out situation?
I'd have thought, just because of the strength of that midfield, whether it's Eze or Odegaard playing and Rice and Zubimendi, I'd have thought it's probably one or the other in terms of playing together. But that's a hunch at the moment. Maybe Arteta's got something up his sleeve, and especially because if you then alternate to some sort of 4-4-2, you're asking a lot more of Saka and whoever plays on the left defensively, and Saka works incredibly hard. That's not what I'm getting at, but does it feel like the best use of his skills? Probably not. So I think it'll be one or the other. In terms of what it kind of means for Arsenal, or how it's kind of evolved you, a guy like Victor Gyökeres, the sort of talent that you ended up plumping for in the summer, that is a guy that's going to make, 15 to 20 runs a game. A bit like with City and Haaland, which did take a little bit of time to adapt. I know he broke the Premier League goal-scoring record in his first year, but there was definitely elements of what did it mean for the rest of the attackers, etc. It will probably be a work in progress. I don't think anyone imagines that someone that's never really played in a top 5 league, or has never really played in the top 5 league, is going to come in and instantly look like the finished article, although his age suggests that he's got to get there sooner than other players that were potentially being talked about. But I was really, really buoyed by his performances in the last few games as well. And I think it helps that, in some of the so-called easier games against weaker opposition, no disrespect to them, he's got a very good goal-scoring record already in this Arsenal shirt. And that's going to give him so much more confidence going forward. And you do feel like a side that were kind of just stuck in a kind of U outside most opponents' boxes last year and had so much control, weren't getting counter-attacked easily. There was no kind of threat of conceding goals from that position. But it's so difficult when there's 10 men behind the ball and it's packed in there and you've got a few players missing with injury and your form has been up and down. It didn't feel like you were carrying much momentum, whereas being a faster, more inventive side in transition and going for broke kind of off the cuff, and especially when you've got a passer like Declan Rice in there, who I think Zubimendi is a sensational passer as well. But Declan Rice, in terms of his switching of play, there's almost no one like him in the Premier League. In fact, I'd probably say he is the best long-range passer in the Premier League in midfield. So that is definitely a weapon to carry on utilising as the season progresses. And Gyökeres feels like even if he doesn't start every game when Havertz is back, he's still going to have a massive role to play going forward.
Yeah, well, actually, just because you've mentioned Declan Rice, some of his passing this season, I thought I would highlight. This one against Newcastle, he's often accused of not being able to break the lines. Can he play 6, so on? And a lot of the stuff with Declan Rice, there's tons of video evidence to suggest that it's simply not true. This one, again, another great pass. I think this is the Olympiacos game. Gets the ball, looking up, and you can see there's easier passes on, but he just plays it right across the pitch. And this distance that you talk about, he's great at the big switches, but he's also good at breaking the lines quickly in that sense along the ground. And that set us up very quickly for a counter-attack. Again, another one against Newcastle. But you can see he's got more confident on the ball. And Zubimendi's a player that seems to have given him a bit more freedom. You can see him coming towards him more, giving him that option. But these things have really improved in Rice's game. And it just feels that this season he has added absolutely everything. And he wasn't going to be a player that I discussed again, because I talk about him and Zubimendi a lot. But whilst you've brought him up, I think I may as well go into that. What are your thoughts on Declan Rice? A lot of people say that he is the best midfielder in the league at the minute. That's a debate that I don't care much for, but I do know that he's absolutely destroying it at Arsenal. So what are your thoughts overall on him?
Yeah, well, I mean, I got into quite a lot of hot water last weekend. I don't know whether you saw. I went on the show called Saturday Social, which Sky do, and they asked me whether Moises Caicedo. It's a show designed for clips on YouTube and social media. It's a really good fun show to do. Anyway, they asked me, is Moises Caicedo the best midfielder in the Premier League? And I said, no, not in my opinion, because I think it's Declan Rice, and made a case that if they swapped roles, because obviously Caicedo's role at Chelsea is quite different from Rice's at Arsenal, so it's almost a little bit of an unfair comparison. But I was asked the question, so I thought I'd answer. If they swapped roles, I argued that Rice would do Caicedo's role at Chelsea better than the other way around. And because I think he's a significantly better... I don't think Caicedo's anywhere close to him in terms of shooting, in terms of dribbling, in terms of his dead ball delivery, etc., for a number of reasons. And look, a lot of people disagreed with that, and a lot of Chelsea fans really weighed in. And I was accused of racism, and you know what Twitter's like. It's a cesspit. Anyway, it completely kicked off. But yeah, my point is, I do think Declan Rice is the best midfielder in the Premier League at the moment. Look, Rodri, if he gets back to full fitness, obviously enters the discussion as the previous Ballon d'Or winner. But we haven't seen that for a little while. Hopefully he does get back to his best, because he's a spectacular player to watch. And I'm not a neutral in the Premier League anymore, I suppose, because Sunderland are in it. But in terms of title races, I'm a neutral. And yeah, I'd love to see Rodri back to his best, because he's a phenomenal player. But right now, as it stands, the way that Rice has taken his game from who was a really, really promising player at West Ham, when he emerged, I actually thought he was a little bit nervous on the ball at points. And a lot of his physicality was kind of what really stood out in his rangy running style and his ability to kind of eat up ground. By the time he left West Ham, I think he was looking pretty complete. But the way he's evolved over the last 2 and a bit seasons, you can see the coaching that Arteta and his staff have put into him. You can see the confidence he's gained from being a guaranteed starter in one of the best teams in Europe, and a guaranteed starter at England level as well. And I don't think the fact that Arsenal signed Zubimendi, or that Thomas Tuchel is now using Elliot Anderson as a 6, is because they don't think Declan Rice can do it. Of course he can do it. He's just even better as a number 8, in my opinion, and is a more of a game changer as an 8 than a player like Zubimendi or Elliot Anderson could be as a 6. And that's no disrespect to either of them. I just think Declan Rice right now just feels like he's on a level above everyone in the Premier League. And I don't think the gap to Moises Caicedo is massive, by the way. I think Moises Caicedo is a brilliant player, and full credit to him for justifying that £100 million fee, same as Declan Rice. Very rarely do players do that, but I just think Rice is ahead of him.
Yeah, I agree with you on all those points. I really rate Caicedo. I wanted him at Arsenal, and I think he's a phenomenal player. I don't really get the constant debate around the two of them. I think they're slightly different and would actually complement each other really well, and that's what we wanted. But Declan Rice is a player that I think can really help Arsenal charge to the title. And it feels like this year that we need to win something. He has said it himself. Saliba's come out and said it. Gabriel. Saliba actually went a step further and said, if you want to be a legend, you have to win trophies. Now, you are a title race neutral. What is your view on this up from the outside? Because I feel that Arsenal need to win something to change that perception. We will always be the butt of the joke until we actually get over the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you'd have seen with Spurs for years being, ridiculed for their lack of trophies. No one can make that comment anymore. And Arsenal, I don't think a Carabao Cup is enough for this side to be kind of going down in Premier League history. They need to obviously win a league title, because I think they've got all the ingredients of a side that could become one of the great Premier League sides. They're not there yet. Obviously, they need to get some trophies in that cabinet. But you look at the age of this squad, you look at the way they've developed over the last 2 years, let alone what they could be in 2 years' time. And there's a really special squad here, I think. And there's some individuals that, if they get some more trophies in their cabinet, should be in conversations as some of the best, Premier League players of the 21st century. I think there's a good chance that if Saliba and Gabriel, say, pick up a couple of Premier League titles, they're probably in that conversation for best Premier League centre-backs ever. I think Rice, Saka, by the end of their careers, might well be in those conversations too. So I think they definitely do need to win a big trophy. I don't really subscribe to this whole idea of like finishing second is a complete disaster and nothing other than a trophy is Arteta should be under pressure and all that rubbish that you see every May when Arsenal have inevitably, or in the last few years, I say, not really inevitably, but they have slipped up. So I don't think he deserves to leave or has taken them as far as he can if he can't. Because if you keep on putting yourself in the ring, we saw this with City in the Champions League for so long. We saw this with PSG in the Champions League for so long. And PSG, their form in the Champions League wasn't particularly consistent. It got, they reached their first final in 2020. There was another semi-final in there. Then they got another final, absolutely battered Inter Milan, of course. But it's not easy to win these big prizes. No one is pretending it's easy. Everyone claims the Premier League is the best in the world, and I think it is at the moment. But there's some huge teams with massive financial backing that Arsenal are competing against. In Europe, you're looking against sides that right now aren't playing in the strongest domestic leagues that they've been. Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga have probably got an advantage by the time May comes around, because it's very difficult to imagine them not being able to rotate quite heavily in the Champions League. But I would love to see Arsenal win one of the big prizes, not because I've got any special allegiance to Arsenal, but I just like to see big sides and sides that deserve more than they've got get over the line.
Yeah, and I think that well, hopefully we do. That's where I'm at right now. It feels like we can, and it really feels like it will be our year. We've got the strength. And you've mentioned the players returning. You're looking at Havertz, Madueke, Odegaard, Gyökeres, Martinelli, and Gabriel Jesus, if he can offer something. That's yet to be seen. But we've gone through this big block of games with all those players missing, and it's going to be a very, very exciting time because most importantly, they're all attacking players. They're the players that make you get off your seat. They're the players that put the ball in the back of the net. And it's going to be an exciting time. But a huge thanks for joining today. It's been really good chatting to you. Could you please tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can watch a lot of my Sky-related stuff on Sky Sports Premier League on the Lowdown every week. But the best way, if you want to just have my opinions, is just to follow on social media. Dougie, Critchley. I'm the same on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, which I started in July, and I'm really enjoying the journey on there too.
Yeah, we'll make sure and go and check out the channel. Do your channel on follow on all those channels as well, and you will see some really good content. But big thanks for joining. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime soon when Arsenal have actually won the Premier League. Thank you. And if you've enjoyed the show, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Please keep coming back for more. Thank you.
You're now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.